Good evening. Thank you for coming. Just in the interest of everyone's time, I'll get started. If you haven't gotten yourself a plate of food yet, please help yourself. Today is one of those days that required some great flexibility. And so I thank all of you for making time in your busy schedule to come and be here and be present. I was expecting that Dr. Leimer, the person who has been conducting a lot of our survey data and compilation, would be here to give a report that she has given on several different occasions. Unfortunately, due to an illness in her family, she's unable to be here tonight, which means you get a little bit more of me. So hopefully all of you can bear with that. And I'll just go ahead and get started. I believe there are some agendas and some backup documents floating around. There may be some on the table out there in the front if you are interested in such things as note takers and agendas and things like that. I'll do my best to stick to it. I am pleasantly surprised to see all of you and just want to reiterate my deep thanks, gratitude for all the time, all the energy, all the emotion that folks have put into this process, continue to put into this process, the dedication, ongoing commitment. It's very humbling. As I mentioned, we have some food. There's some childcare in the library. If you would like your child to be supervised by Miss Quintisha, she's there. I felt that this quote from Nelson Mandela was particularly appropriate today and as part of this process. He says, "It always seems impossible until it is done." I see some folks have some Keep Calm and Unify shirts. I think they're similar spirit. So I just invite all of us to lean into all those ideas. Again, many of you have heard this before, but for those of you that this is your first meeting, or if you haven't come in a long time, we started way back when. Well, it must have been July, August, when the joint resolutions first came out from both boards. I think it's important for us to remember that that happened, that this was a voluntary process, that we agreed that working jointly together to improve the educational and social outcomes of all current and future students enrolled in our public schools, that we passed resolutions to explore a unified school, and that we're committed to working together in this spirit, committed to engaging all stakeholders in a process that builds consensus around the best pathway for Willow Creek and Bayside MLK to create a unified school solution, that we continue to actively seek input from and participation of parents, guardians, staff, community, and students, some of which you will hear more of tonight, and a lot of results. And the idea is that for this process is to generate recommendations to the Board of Trustees, having considered the advantages, disadvantages, issues, and concerns and feasibility of a single school solution. And so, as many of you are aware, there have been a tremendous number of students and staff and parents and administrators and board members and already engaged community partners in our community that have come together quite mightily to do a lot of this work in the form of working groups, and I've lost count of how many meetings, frankly, but people give a lot of time, like really seriously, probably in the hundreds of thousands of hours at this point. And I just want to invite everybody to take a moment and reflect on that idea. Whatever people's motivations, perceived, real, are the commitment of that kind of time to anything in this busy world that we live in, this crazy world that we live in, is really significant. That time is dedicated to collaborating to developing a unification plan that engages all stakeholders and builds consensus on what is most likely to be successful. And as I have continued to say, nothing has been decided yet. As many of you know, that process was to engage as many stakeholders as we could in a feedback and input process, identify priorities, pathways towards the unification towards a single school, and to build consensus around the best pathway. The aim of generating a final report to both boards, exploring those possible options and the feasibility of those options, allowing us to consult with local public boards, local agencies, all of you. And so, as I always do, I want to invite all of us just to take a moment and relax. As I said, today, for me, required a lot of flexibility. I don't know how each and every one of your days went. Many of you may feel that things like astrology are totally crazy. Many of you may live your lives by some things like that. If you're at all a believer in that sort of thing, these last few weeks may have been a particularly emotional time. A time that was challenging in communication. A time that may have felt confusing or had rapid swings in emotion. Now, the good news is, while it won't be over tonight, it should start to feel a lot better and a lot clearer by March the 11th. So I'm going to strike my chime twice. I'm going to invite all of you to take 3 big, deep, cleansing breaths in an 8-4 ratio. And remember, if something starts to come up emotionally tonight, to take a moment and stop and breathe and keep calm and unify. As I strike the chime a second time, just want to invite you to gently open your eyes, come back into the space. All right. Just want to ground us again in the spirit of consensus building, collaboration, community engagement, civil discourse, and equity of voice. Maybe some things that you agree with, maybe some things that you don't. I want to invite everybody to do so in a civil manner. Quick reminder of the structure of this whole thing. At work groups, we're here to represent the community in this process of parents, of students, staff, general community members. And that the District Unification Committee and the Willow Creek Unification Committee, we're here to represent both boards in the process. And that it is the work of the task force, which consists of 2 board members from Willow Creek and 2 board members from Sausalito Marin City, and myself, to synthesize the work group reports and make final recommendations to both boards about how to compile all the evidence that has been gathered in this process. And as you'll see, there's quite a bit. So I will do my best Dr. Limer impersonation for you all. So one of the things that we wanted to make clear were sort of the total number of respondents in all the surveys. And so those of you that have come to DAG meetings and other spaces and may have seen some of this stuff, I'm not totally sure if this was a slide that was available to you at that point. So just here for your consideration, we created a teacher and staff survey. 34 teachers and staff took that survey, which represents actually pretty much all of the staff at Willow Creek and at Bayside MLK. 113 students took this survey. We asked 4th through 8th graders at both schools. Really quite a high representation from those grade levels as well. 151 parents took the English survey. 11 parents took the Spanish-speaking survey. 259 people took the general community survey. One of the things that we've discovered in the process of analyzing this data is that it's likely that a significant portion of parents from Willow Creek took the community survey and not the parent survey. And so that's one aspect that I want to invite you to consider when we go through these results. We had 55 parents from Bayside MLK take the English parent survey. And I believe 8 parents from Bayside MLK take the Spanish survey. So at a school of 115 kids, that's actually a significant representation. So, folks also wanted to know the survey results by race and ethnicity. And so here you have them broken out in both numbers and in percentages. Along the first line is teachers and staff. You can see 2 folks, 7%, American Indian, Alaska Native. 2 folks, Asian, same percentage. 6 black people, about 19%. 1 Latina person, 3%. 2 or more races, 10%. 65% white folks, 13% other. Other is a self-selected category that could be multiple races or just a different choice. We see some similar distributions amongst the student survey. 2% American Indian, Alaskan Native, 4% Asian, 25% black, 11% Latina, 1% Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, 25% 2 or more races, 21% white. Pretty strong distribution there amongst students. Pretty reflective, I think, of our student body. One of the things that I would invite people also to consider is that often, but not always, folks that choose 2 or more races are people like me, or people that might visually, you think, would identify as black people, but might identify as people as 2 or more races. And so I'd just like to invite folks to consider that as they look at the data. Spanish-speaking survey was 100% Hispanic Latina. Of the parent survey in English, we see also a similar distribution, although a little stronger on the white parent representation, with 44% white, 14% 2 or more races, 3% Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, 13% Latina, and 26% black, 9% Asian, 2% American Indian, Alaska Native. And you see the general community numbers there across the bottom. 0.5% Native folks, 5% Asian, 6% black, 7% Latina, 11% 2 or more races. 73% of the general community survey was taken by white people. So as we go through the statistics, just keep that balance in mind. Here you can see them by school. You see the balance there. 13 BMLK, 14 Willow Creek, 7 both, 38, 41, 21%. Students, about 30% BMLK, 70% Willow Creek. Parents, really similar distribution. Actually, looks like all of the Spanish-speaking parents were from Bayside MLK. Oh, nope, one with both schools. 6% of the general community, or 2%, sorry, 6 respondents. 53% from Willow Creek. 6% from both. 38% from neither. Yes, and I'm going to pass you a microphone so everyone else can hear your question.
Thank you. I was just asking about general community by school. It seems like there would be a staff, teacher, student, or parent affiliation. I don't understand who answered the survey as general community by school.
Yeah, so we asked people who might have grandkids or nieces or nephews, or who might be volunteers in both schools. That's what that question is reflective of. Thanks for asking. Yes?
I believe you said you also thought that a bunch of the Willow Creek parents also filled out the general community survey.
I think so, and I think that's why we see this data point here. I don't think that Willow Creek parents under-responded to the survey. I think they just may have responded in the general community survey as much or perhaps a little bit more than on the parent survey. Our response rates from surveys from Willow Creek have generally been quite high, so I would consider it to be an anomaly if we didn't see a high response rate. We asked people where they lived, except for teachers and staff. And it might have actually been an interesting question to ask that. But the reality is many of our teachers and staff don't live in our community. But some do. Might have been interesting to know. Anecdotally, I can probably answer that question. 47% of the students that responded are from Marin City, 31% from Sausalito, 21% from somewhere else. Probably mostly San Rafael, but they just said somewhere else. 55% of the Spanish-speaking parents picked other. 9% or one person picked Sausalito, 36% picked Marin City. And you see that similar distribution there in the general community as we saw on some of these other slides. About 18% or 47 people picked Marin City on the general community survey. 166 or 65% picked Sausalito, and 43 or 17% picked somewhere else. So, we asked people if they had a preference over one campus or campuses. And this is what they said. Most of the staff had a preference for two campuses. 61%, 20 people had a preference for two campuses. 9 people or 27% said no preference. And 4 people or 12% said they'd prefer one campus. Parents, a little bit more evenly split. 58 people or 39% said one campus. 61 people or 41% said two campuses. And 31 people or 21% said they didn't have a preference. Spanish-speaking parents, also a majority, although small, 64%, 7 people said they preferred two campuses. 4 people, 36%, said they preferred one campus. In the general community survey, that's where you see a little difference in the trend. Slightly more, 101, 39% said they preferred one campus. 37%, 95 people said they preferred 2 campuses, and 24% of people said they had no preference. So I want to give you an opportunity. Why don't you turn and talk to somebody that's next to you on your elbow, turn and talk to somebody at your table, take a minute, see what you make of these results, and I'll ring you back and get into a little bit more data. But take a moment and talk to each other. What do you think you see so far? And go ahead and thank your partner. Some of your questions or conversation may have been wondering if people chose one campus or if people chose 2 campuses, where might that be? And I do want to give a shout out to our Unification Task Force Committee members that are here tonight, Deborah and Caroline and Alina. You all cannot imagine how much time and thought went into asking these questions and crafting them. Truly. It was a really strong effort. And so we wanted to ask people to follow up if they had a preference between one campus or another. What might it be? And this is what people said. People that wanted one campus chose Willow Creek by about 75% if they were teachers and staff. Chose Bayside MLK, 25%. Remember, this is just people that chose one campus. Just 4 people that were staff members said they wanted one campus. Just 4. We didn't ask the kids. We asked them a different kind of question, which you'll see in a moment. Parents, 32%, 19 parents chose Bayside MLK. 41 parents, or 68%, chose Willow Creek. And again, those were just the parents that said they wanted one campus. Spanish-speaking parents overwhelmingly chose Bayside MLK, but also they were overwhelmingly Bayside MLK parents that responded to that survey. General community, 94% Willow Creek, 6% Bayside MLK. However, just want to gently remind you that on the last slide, one campus was not the most overwhelmingly popular choice. More people not from the general community, teachers and staff, chose 2 campuses. And we asked them what kind of configuration did they want to see. We didn't ask them where, but we asked them what kind of configuration. Teachers and staff, overwhelmingly 85% chose a elementary and middle school configuration. A small number chose no preference or other. Parents on the English-speaking survey also overwhelmingly chose, if 2 campuses, an elementary and middle school configuration. The general community that chose 2 campuses also overwhelmingly chose elementary and middle. The only real outlier here on this slide was on the Spanish-speaking parent survey, and they chose a pre-K through first grade configuration with a second through grade configuration. Sorry, I'm casting a large shadow there, I imagine. Well, that was their choice. And then we asked people if elementary and middle, which at which campus. And here you see, again, some pretty strong trends. Staff, elementary at Willow Creek, 77%. Only 2 people chose elementary at Bayside MLK. Parents on the English-speaking survey, a little smaller N, 51% chose elementary at Willow Creek, 35% elementary at Bayside MLK, 14% no preference. General community, pretty similar distribution. 6%, 4 people, elementary at Bayside MLK. 74%, 48 people, elementary at Willow Creek. 13 or 20% of people had no preference. And then we asked folks that had this small anomalous choice of pre-K through first at one campus and second through 8th grade at another campus where they might want to see that. And the overwhelming choice was pre-K through first here at Bayside MLK. So I want to give you an opportunity again, turn and talk to a friend about what you just heard, what you just saw. You could talk to your whole table too. You don't have to limit it to one person if you're sitting in a large community setting. What do you think? What do you make of what you just heard and what you just saw? I'll ring you back in a couple minutes. Go ahead and thank your partners or your table group. Finish your final word or final thought. How you doing? Go ahead and finish your final word or thought. Thank you, partner. And just want to bring your attention back. I hope that some of that information is helpful to the folks on the facilities committee in some kind of way. This information may be helpful to the folks on the transportation committee. So we ask people how they get to school. 2% of students said by bike. Yeah. 4th through 8th. I think we need to encourage biking a little more in our community, maybe. I don't know. 6% of students said they got there by bus. 50% of kids said they got there by car. A lot of car riding happening. 26%, 29 kids said they walked, and 20 kids, or 18%, said they had some combination of these. So either bike, walk, car, bus, car, walk, car, bike. Some people get to school one way, get home another, or vice versa. It looks like the Spanish-speaking parents got asked this question somehow, but there you see their answers. Again, most people by car, actually more people by car. Smaller number of total respondents, but larger percentage. 80% by car. Here you can see this laid out and represented in maybe a little bit more easily digestible way. I'm a big fan of bar graphs, but you can see this question. This was asked of parents, how does your child or children get to school? And these were the respondents. Again, overwhelmingly, car and walk. Same thing on the Spanish-speaking survey. A little bit more graphic detail, but 78% of kids said they never ride the bus by themselves. We are not taking the bus to our schools, at least not alone. And again, big car, big walk, little of everything else. So before we get into this, again, want to just give you a moment, turn and talk. What do you think about the results of the transportation survey? How our community gets to school? What implications might that have on unification? I'll give you a couple minutes and I'll ring you back. Go ahead and finish your final word or thoughts. Thank your partner or your row or your table or however you've configured your conversation. So we asked kids, this is from the student survey, about student interactions. And I apologize for the labeling on this slide not being quite so clear, but because I've looked at this data a lot and seen it presented in other ways, I am confident in telling you that this is data from Willow Creek. So we asked kids, salud, how well do students at your school get along with each other? I just want to remind everybody of the safe coughing and sneezing protocols out in the world these days. The little elbow inside your jacket. Frequent hand washing, sing the ABCs. How well do students at your school get along with each other? 56% said very well. 40.4% said we get along okay most of the time. And about 3.5–4% said not very well. Yes? They did. Here it is.
Was that last graph though, not just Willow Creek, but both schools?
Oh, maybe it was both schools. Thank you. So here's the raw data, and thank you for asking that clarification question. David was like, wait a minute. It's a very principled question. 76% of kids at Bayside MLK said very well. 24% said we get along okay most of the time. And then there you can see the distribution for Willow Creek. Pretty even, 47 very well. We get along okay most of the time. 5% not very well. Few students at Willow Creek said that. The race, ethnicity of the 4 students who made the report of not getting along very well, as you can see along the bottom of the distribution graph, are Black, Latina, Mexican, and American. And that's a typo, but it was alien. We did have some very creative survey answers. They weren't frequent. That was one of them. One of the students answered in terms of modes of transportation about how they get to school when they had to write an option that they fly. So, yeah. Oh, actually, thank you, Caroline. Why don't you take a minute and talk about what you saw? Go ahead, turn and talk, find a partner, find a row, find a table. I'll ring you back in 2 minutes. Student interactions. What do you think about that data? And go ahead and thank your partner, your row, your table. Finish your final word, your final thoughts. Some of the questions that we asked on the survey, we thought we kind of knew anecdotally, and so we wanted to try to be more sure about some of the assumptions that we had. But one of the biggest assumptions that we've had in entering this process is that our kids actually do things together already. Not infrequently, I might add. And so we asked them, what are the things that you do together most often? We asked them that for a couple reasons, but we wanted to know where were some other places that we could build on unification that's already happening. And this is what they said. They said Bridge the Gap is an important place where they already work together. For any of you that may have wondered why we changed our regularly scheduled board meeting on March the 14th, it's so that everybody can attend the Bridge the Gap fundraiser. So if you got time, maybe go check it out. A lot of kids play sports together. I'm teasing an acknowledgement that I'll give tomorrow, but kids from both schools, 4th and 5th grade, just completed a basketball season, and our teams, both boys and girls, competed in the championship game. The boys won. You can see there's a few other areas here. Art was the next greatest frequency. Play dates, dance. Sometimes people said none. But you can see there's a lot of different things that kids are already doing together in our community. So, sorry about the formatting here. Catch that. We asked people what they thought makes a high quality K-8 school. And these were the most commonly occurring answers. They said teachers and curriculum, parent involvement and school environment, diversity and equity and community support and high expectations and leadership. These were the qualities that folks identified as making a high quality K-8 school. And this was based on a compilation of responses from the community survey, the parent and teacher and staff survey. This is the number of parents that participated in the unification process. We also asked how unification's going. What do people think? How do they feel about the process? We were unsure about the number of English parents, which is why you see those red question marks. But on the Spanish survey, 46% of parents said that they had participated in the unification process that answered this question. 53% of teachers and staff, and 51% of community members. So a slight majority of people that answered this question have actually been here doing all of these things, and then some other people weren't. And here you can see we asked them two questions. We said, well, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, what do you think about the process? And then we asked, do you think your voice is being heard? And I'm sorry we don't have the English parent data. As soon as Dr. Lammer's finished with it, we'll make sure that we get it out so that you can see that. We had some additions to that survey, and so I think in the interest of accurate reporting, she maybe wasn't able to finish the crunching of the numbers due to the illness in her family, and so that's why we see that on the slide. Spanish-speaking parents, teachers and staff for process said 2.4. a little bit lower than average, if 3 is an average. Spanish-speaking parents said 3.8. The general community said 2.1. Really kind of not well. When we asked people if their voices were being heard, teachers and staff were much closer to a 3, 2.8. Remember, these are averages, so there's, a dispersion of answers on both sides, but I want to give you averages, 2.8. Spanish-speaking parents said 3.0. General community said 2.3. General community, not so well. Spanish-speaking parents, a little bit better than average. Teachers, closer to average on voice heard, and a little bit more towards the not well side on progress. We also asked people what their excitement was about unifying schools. And teachers and staff identified these areas. Working together and learning from each other. I would be excited by the opportunity to do that under Unification. They were excited by the idea of more students. And they were excited about all working toward a common goal, one diverse community, achieving educational equity. Probably have a pretty biased opinion in that regard, but I think those are good things to be excited about. We asked teachers and staff what concerns they had about unifying schools. And they said structural and logistic concerns, and transparency and inclusion, and families leaving the area, and the emotional nature of this process as being concerns. We also asked the general community the question, what else do you want boards to know? And the answers were that they had concerns about the unification process, and Willow Creek had concerns and fears, and that there were concerns and fears about the district board. And that really a vast majority of people want unification to be successful. There was a small number of people that responded to the survey that didn't want to unify. But the overwhelming majority of people want to see this process be a success. Parents answered this question too. A little broad there. They wanted the boards to know their thoughts about unification. So I'm unsure if the long form answers are in the handouts, but we have them. People took time to write their thoughts and other feedback. And I think what this is saying is they would like our boards to read those. So, go ahead, turn and talk. I'll ring you back in 2 minutes, and then we'll transition to some work group reports. We can post these on the website, absolutely.
remind me your name?
Renee.
Renee. And your wife's Tiffany.
Tiffany. You guys leaving?
I'll see you pretty soon. So how do you speak about this people working on it? Oh yeah, you guys should give. Oh, you guys do have each other. Oh.
Go ahead and thank your partner. Finish your final word or thought. I'm going to turn it over to our many work groups, but our amazing student work group coordinator, Ruby Rose, who is still a busy high school student that has homework and things, needs to head out. So I'm going to let her talk first, and then I'll turn it over to the rest of the folks. So Ruby Rose is going to give us a quick update on the student work group.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Ruby Rose Musqua. I'm a sophomore at Tamalpais High School and leading and facilitating the conversations with the student work group. Right now, we are working on the plan. Our work group is made up of students that are attending or have attended Bayside MOK and Willow Creek. Our hope is to have the plan completed by the end of this weekend, and then we will continue to meet to further discuss how we can share the students' voices and experience of what has happened, because they were the ones that were most greatly impacted by this segregation. So we'll be working with Renee and his wonderful wife Tiffany to make videos and documentaries and really try and share as loud as possible and as much as possible these students' voices. Because as I said before, theirs is really the most important, and theirs is the one that needs to be heard by everyone. And so that it's not just a thought of that happened in August and we're doing great and that's it. No, this is an issue, and this is a recurring issue, and this is something that needs to stay present and not forgot about. So that is what we're working on right now with the student work group. It's going pretty well. Some struggles with finding timing with a lot of busy high schoolers and 8th graders, but we're coming together, and I'm really happy. And with Dr. Garcia's incredible work, I think it's going to be great and really successful in getting everything I said get done. Thank you.
Thank you. So just a quick reminder, along with the student work group, we had a fiscal integrity and transparency work group, and we're going to hear their update tonight. We had a philanthropy and fundraising work group. We heard their report out at the last Unification Town Hall. We had a culture and climate work group. We heard their report out at the last Unification Town Hall. We had a staffing work group. We had a process work group. We had a transportation work group. I'm hoping to update tonight from them. I got a small one. It's in the slide. I can say it or you can say it. Whatever you feel comfortable with. We had a curriculum work group. And we also had a facilities work group. And I think it's really fair to say that the facilities work group and the transportation work group are really waiting for some tighter direction from us as a unification task force, which we really have yet to give, to be 100% transparent. Although I do feel that these survey results are informative for both of those groups. And so I'd like you to consider whatever you saw here tonight as a starting point while you continue to wait for direction from us. So, without further ado, most of you know what the work groups are and are about. We've gotten draft reports from most folks. We're getting close to getting draft reports from everybody. As I mentioned, we We'll hear from Fit Tag and Transportation tonight. And if you would give Kirsten Thomas a big warm round of applause, she'll give us an update from the Transportation Work Group.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. I'm just going to take a moment to read the vision statement that we came up with as a group. We are committed to every K through 8 student in Marin City and Sausalito getting to and from school in a way that is safe, reliable, and environmentally conscious, so that families are confident in a great start to their day. And while we didn't know exactly where we might be transporting kids to and from or how many, we do acknowledge and offer recommendations to keep what is working well with regard to current transportation, and now we have the survey results, so that's further informative. We also discussed and recommended prioritizing green solutions, considering staggered start times for the schools, and consider a survey with parents as a way of understanding barriers once we have narrowed down things to a smaller solution set. And the members of the group are listed at the bottom, and we yield any further time to the FIT group.
Thank you, Kristen. So, per the request from FIT, I'm going to escape from Google Slides, and I am going to No, not at all. It's fine. I've used to be a devotee of PowerPoint, and I have kind of switched over to Google Slides, but it's important to be able to function on multiple platforms.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Walker on behalf of the Fiscal Integrity and Transparency Work Group. Wanted to present our report in vis-a-vis PowerPoint. Do you want to have the financials up just in case? So, all right, before I get going, and I'm going to try to make this as truncated as humanly possible, we wanted to acknowledge a couple of things. So first off, we're going to go through and talk about our goals and our mission statement, and then some of our findings. Yeah, sorry. But we also want to acknowledge the fact that we should have all seen this coming, but shocker, the financial matters within this community are extremely sensitive. There is a long history here that goes well beyond my time involved in this matter, well beyond some of the times of some of our group members. And we want to be very sensitive to that. Along those lines, when I go through this, I just ask that everybody stay open-minded, and importantly, as the name suggests, our first priority is the integrity of this information and the transparency of this information. So, to the extent that you disagree with anything in here, or you have a question, or you cite an error, please let us know. I mean, this is going to be a lot more fruitful if it's a bit of a conversation, right? Because that's, after all, what we're trying to achieve. Am I able to control? Do you mind? All right. So like I said, we're going to go through the goals. This is just the acknowledgement of how challenging a subject this is for this community. But what we thought we would accomplish when we formed the group in the first town hall, I think that was back in October 15th, was to facilitate an open dialogue within this community where we all started from the same place. So in other words, we all kind of agreed from a level setting perspective what was the information, and from there that could inform our discussion. And in order to do that, we needed to kind of go about distilling the finances in a way that we could all comprehend. We wanted to figure out whether or not this community, from a financial perspective, could publicly fund education. Was this even viable, right? We love the idea of having this great unified school. can we finance it in its current form? We wanted to ensure the full funding of all the kids receiving public education in this community during the bridge period, during the unification period. That is, after all, ultimately what we're trying to achieve is a unified public education. And lastly, we wanted to encourage transparency on behalf of the district board and the WTA board with respect to some of the key aspects of unification to the extent possible. Now, we fully recognize that that fourth one is super squishy and is a bit qualitative. The first three are a little more objective and quantitative. All right, so let's just jump right in. So the first thing that we looked at was just from a viability perspective, where does our community come out relative to other communities from the perspective of revenue? In other words, let's presuppose that a couple of neighboring districts are not bankrupt. So they are funding their public education. We chose Mill Valley and Ross, both obviously in Marin, and just as a kind of one metric proxy, and it appears as though the district is pretty well funded. So our community should be happy with that, at least that data point. Now, one of the other interesting observations here is that in terms of expenses, it isn't a clear linear function from a scaling perspective. So in other words, if there's just this natural economies of scale in a public school setting, what you would have expected to see here was our district as the most expensive, and then a sliding scale, because it's the smallest by head count, and a sliding scale down to Mill Valley being the largest. That's not what we see here. So we couldn't make that deduction or inference. Next, we looked at, as with all the available data that we had within the public domain, we looked at the expense management from the two public schools within this community. And we went back as far as we had data. What we learned was that Willow Creek had consumed less money in aggregate and per student than Bayside MLK. Additionally, Willow Creek had managed expenses and had managed a pretty tight range of expenses through its history and through its growth. So let me do a quick explanation here. Oh, okay. Well, this is a bubble chart. So the blue bubbles are Willow Creek expenses. The red are Bayside MLK. And what you see here is a bubble that changes size based on the number of students. This simply is the graphical representation of what I just said before. In terms of expense management, through time, Willow Creek has maintained a pretty tight band. And on a per student basis, that's been significantly below the amount of expenses on a per student basis. Yes, awesome, thank you. By the way, thank God, a question. I don't care, go for it.
Did the committee at all consider the distinct difference between, so you basically, the issue that I'm taking is that you're comparing a charter school with a school district.
Yeah.
And those are very different entities, politically, structurally, and in terms of their overall responsibility. So it's like comparing apples and oranges in this sort of reduced, simplistic way.
I love the question, thank you. So again, we're looking at finances. And we're looking at finances insofar as how can that influence what the Unification Task Force, ultimately, and the superintendent decide. Oh, that's right too. Yeah, by the way, we've carved out, sorry, thanks, I should have started with that. These are just the school expenses. These are not district expenses. Those have been carved out. I believe, so.
In looking at other districts, did you look like at Bolinas or Shoreline, whose enrollment is significantly less to see the per student spending?
So in short, no. But you're going towards the scale argument, right? Yeah. So one of the things we were contemplative with respect to was the scale issue just in terms of our district, first off. And historically speaking, we only have one sample here, the sample size of 1, but we have Willow Creek, scaling through time and not substantially changing its expense, again, just expense management. And in this graph, I mean, one of the things that you can infer is an ability for a proactive board that has flexibility to adjust as and when needed from an expense management perspective. If we keep, I'm cognizant of time. All right, so other things that we learned.
Just to piggyback on Deborah's comment, just as an example, so it is getting to the economies of scale issue a little bit that I think you're addressing, but just to build on that, an example just across the way here is Belina Stinson, who has around, and it's a small school district similar to this school district, one campus of little less than 100 kids, and their per pupil spending is around 40, in the low 40,000s. So they're also a basic aid district. So I think that's, again, I think it's really try to pull out just school expenditures. It's not impossible, but it's still an economies of scale when you're looking at 100 kids versus 400.
Nuri, do you want to take that?
Thank you. Since I'm the one who did the numbers, I can try to comment on these. I think part of the reason we went actually all the way back to 2002 is because the question that you raise immediately comes to everyone's mind, including ours, that perhaps, as you said, that running a school of 100 kids is not possible at, spending $10,000 per student or $20,000 per student. So at that moment, I said, well, Willow Creek at some point was a 100, student. So now let me also very clearly state that the district-related expenses are all taken out. In this calculation, where we calculate the number for MLK, everything that has to do with the district that's not directly related to the school is excluded. It's not going into the calculation. So this is just the school expenses. So, me too. So I think just to perhaps evolve the discussion further, all of these are driven in an Excel sheet with explicit, references to the reports that the district has filed with the state, and there are direct links, and we welcome any of these comments to help improve the accuracy of these statements. We don't want to, we are not experts. You were the superintendent of the district for a year, and you probably have much closer intuition to the numbers. Please take a look and tell us how we need to adjust these, and we will do so.
Do you think it would be helpful to? Yeah.
And I would just add to that again, this is just data, and it's our intention to just present the data. It's not with a perspective on which governance body necessarily the district should adopt, nor is the intention to compare and say that one is better. Our intention was to establish baseline data. What are the schools spending? What have the schools spent? So that's what this presents, and to the extent that anyone thinks that there's an error in it, we would be very open to hearing that. But Nuri has spent hours pouring through the publicly available data, and we believe that it's factually correct. Again, we're not necessarily presenting
the intention of this slide is to present the data. I'll leave it at that.
And by the way, just for the right way of context, it's a lot more interesting looking at a graph than looking at our spreadsheet, but our model is quite good in terms of giving an apple-to-apple comparison. I mean, that is one of the primary goals of our group, and that is what we have achieved. And in fact, one of our recommendations for the Unification Task Force and for the district at large is that going forward, for the benefit of everybody in the community, that we continue to populate that spreadsheet so that people outside of the ranks with whom is commenting are able to digest these things, because you guys are deep in it. It becomes like a second nature to you. But for the rest of us that don't spend nearly as much time and consume hundreds and hundreds of pages of those types of filings, it's really helpful to have it in a kind of a clear, concise model.
Just one bit of information that I think would make this a better presentation, if there were a way to indicate the grade spreads that these blue balls are serving. For instance, I don't know when in Willow Creek's history they started serving, K through 8, or, and I think that would be useful.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. In fact, when we shared it, I think with all of you a couple of days ago, and Josh Barrow responded asking, could you make a version of the same chart? It's not spending per pupil, but it's spending per classroom. And I did, actually. I have my first draft today, but I didn't want to share it because I want to make sure the count of classroom at every year for the last 20 years is really correct. So I would like to socialize that a little bit, correct it, and then I will share. The graph doesn't look substantially different, but let's get it correct first, and then we can share it.
Okay, my turn. I think the points that Tarina brought up are important. If there are structural reasons why there is a different per pupil spend, rather than economies of scale, it's important for us to, well, let me finish up. It's important for us to understand that as we're choosing structural options, for instance, union versus non-union. So if we were to choose a traditional org charter, but go union for the entirety of the district, then that's a structural difference that causes those disparities between the bubbles. So those are important to identify.
Absolutely. I think this chart, thank you, Caroline. I think this chart tries to speak to that because we anticipated that's the natural question that comes to people's mind. If you could go actually from the beginning of this chart, Scott, I think it would be helpful.
Go for it. If you
okay, yeah, I'll talk to it. So basically, the average, we said then, let's compare ourselves to Mill Valley. How are they doing it with $17,000? And with $25,000 per kid, we have a hard time sharing this money. So, when we look at it, okay, where does the money go? The first observation is that when we compare how much of this money is going to the teachers, it's not really very different. I mean, between Mill Valley and us, we are spending about the same amount of money on teachers on a per student basis in Mill Valley versus us. The next observation is that, basically, the union question that Caroline brought up is significant, and as a result of that, the expenses for the staff on a per student basis at MLK are higher compared to Willow Creek. But when you average them out, and especially given the fact that there are many more students at Willow Creek, the average comes out to be comparable to Mill Valley for the 500 kids in both schools. Please go ahead. Okay, so one thing we want to highlight again, you can see the contrast in benefits between Mill Valley and our school district. Please keep in mind the right-hand side is a blended result for our entire school district. So it's got both Willow Creek numbers as well as the Bayside MLK numbers. Our benefits are lower, again, because the averages are skewed by the Willow Creek numbers, and their benefits as a portion of the overall compensation are lower.
So just to add, I mean, that's one of the things that the Unification Task Force should be contemplating, right? I mean, thinking about the mix and obviously how that...
Now, if I go to the... But then, I say, we have $8,000 per student more. For sure, we should be able to pay union wages and benefits to all of our teachers when we unify. I think there is really no contest on that statement. Then it kind of begs the question then, okay, so what do we need to do? Like, where do we need to be more frugal to be able to basically comfortably deal with our staff? And there you can see the big contrast between the two budgets. On a per student basis, the services and operating costs are significantly different. I mean, we are spending close to like $8,000 per student in services and operating costs, whereas Mill Valley is spending about $1,000, perhaps something between $1,000 and $1,500. So then we drill down on the right-hand side, the third bar. Question.
What are you referring to as services?
Very good question. This, unfortunately, in the publicly available budget reports that are submitted to the state are not explicitly broken out. Some of the, LCAP reports and so forth give some hint as it applies in part to special education or perhaps, other type of special contracts that the state mandates that we report explicitly, but it's all these expenses you're approving every month, over a whole year. They are, they're adding up. I think a closer scrutiny perhaps could answer this question. I did break those down on the right-hand side to some extent, but again, the big bulk is services. I mean, these are service contracts that we provide to external, suppliers. It could be transportation, it could be contribution to special education. I don't know. Perhaps the superintendents have a better intuition what they may be.
Well, I just want to clarify and kind of ground everybody that this is for both schools that you're talking about. Right, and so what you're saying is both schools spend a lot of money on service contracts, and so I just want to clarify that for everybody and invite everybody to take a big deep breath. It's complex, it's emotional, right? And furthermore, I want to point out that when you have small school districts and you have small schools, and you don't have a district office staff of 35 people like Mill Valley has, sometimes in order to get stuff done, you got to contract out for services, right? And so I know that there's a lot of conversation always in our community about, whether or not, certain administrative functions are of value or not of value, but I just want to invite everybody to kind of lean into the idea that there are many, many reasons why small school districts need to contract out for services, and they're not all bad reasons or about waste or about any negative reason. I'm not saying you're saying that, but I just want to kind of ground everybody in the room on that idea, and that these. Traditionally in education, we do what's called a like school or a like district comparison, right? And so what I'd invite you to consider, and you've done a tremendous amount of work, and please don't take what I'm going to say as anything other than a deep appreciation for all the work that you've all done, is do some comparisons around schools that have 500, school districts that have 500 kids, and then see if you can do them here in Marin County or in the Bay Area where there's similar income or property tax communities, basic aid school district with 500 kids, and then see what the comparison is like.
Mine's real basic. Could you just list out the categories that are?
Oh,
yeah.
On the far right, that's it's not terribly crisp, is it? Oh my God.
You want me to help?
We have equipment, depreciation, communications, dues, licenses, travel. There's all one category. Insurance, facility operations and utility, cafeteria, leases and maintenance, and then the massive blue on the bottom is services. That was top to bottom. Hopefully that was helpful.
Just one quick comment. And I appreciate you putting it like this, and then if you line it up with a district of 550 kids, these are also areas that we could look at efficiencies through combining the schools.
So yeah, one of the tasks we haven't quite gotten to the end. We're out of time anyway, but the fact remains, this is a dynamic project. And one of the things that the group has not undertaken is sort of a combination. All we are working from, of course, are the projected budgets that, were reflected on the giant bubble chart. And so, there's no synergy type evaluation there. That being said, I think we would have to have a lot of insight. And to Superintendent Garcia's earlier point, obviously, there are issues given the district's size. There remain significant challenges from a fiscal responsibility perspective. Let's not lose sight of this being simply an informative conversation. This work product is meant to be informative and to open dialogue and provide transparency. So as a community, we can all speak and speak from the same place as a starting place. But what shouldn't be lost on anyone is that as we move forward in this unification process, we need to be very mindful of the expenses. We can't optimize anything if we play fast and loose with anything. We're not big enough. We don't have big enough balance sheet to be irresponsible. And we haven't gotten to the recommendations. I'm out of time to get to the recommendations. I think we can distribute this later anyway. But in terms of the, we got a lot of those. So the very first recommendation that we had, we kind of bucketed them for ease of use. The first of which is the fact that we should be looking through the lens of unification and seeing this community as one whole community. All the kids in our publicly funded education are part of our community. As part of that, during the unification process, all of which they should maintain funding for their programs, so as to reduce any sort of trauma, or dislocation, or challenges, or impact to the kids. Let's handle all of this stuff among us adults and work through all of the wrinkles that these plans entail and challenges, but let's keep the funding for all of the kids. We have a couple of bullet points as to the ways in which to effectuate that. Basically, there just have to be agreements at the board's level, and that has to be ratified. In terms of ongoing transparency and ease of use, we would like the model that we've created, or that basically Nuri created, to be adopted going forward so as to enable us as a community to always be on the same page with respect to publicly funded education, the finances, the expenses, and so on and so forth. That way, we can all have open dialogue, be on the same page, and kind of be able to progress the conversation. We want, just a sec, going back to the cost management piece, we believe that a group of people that have the requisite experience and insight, singularly focused on budgeting and expense management just for the school, nothing else, is probably best positioned on a go-forward basis to manage the budget for a unified school. We know, and we don't spend any time in our report really discussing this because it's really the facilities, I think, but we are fully aware of the need for maintenance to the schools, or to the physical buildings. As an aside, I think that discussing ways in which to underwrite that might become a little challenging, and I think probably require their own kind of ad hoc work group to explore. We already talked about managing consultants. That's really a euphemism for just managing and controlling expenses where we can. Sorry, by manage I mean minimize. And lastly, is just a shout out to everyone. Really, let's really work diligently to adopt best practices, kind of best in breed from both institutions. That's it.
Thanks. Let's give them a big round of applause. I want to point out that it takes a lot of courage, whether we agree or we don't agree, or wherever we fall on our reaction to this report. I just want to invite everybody to take a big deep breath. Thank you all for working so hard. We do appreciate it. Some things for your consideration. Ballina Stinson, which is a similar school district enrollment, actually has 54,000 per pupil spending with admin. Shoreline Unified, 30,000. Lincoln Elementary, 47,000. So those are a couple other small districts here in our county that y'all might want to take a look at. That we're particularly excited by your recommendations about providing regular, accessible financial information about our fiscal viability. And we're glad you want to keep working even though you've done a ton of work. And we hope we can add some people to the conversation. And appointing an advisory board of volunteers, as you recommend, is I think something that merits a lot of further, deeper exploration. In terms of decision-making authority, there's some ed code hitches, but it doesn't mean that you can't make recommendations and support the fiscal integrity and transparency of the district, and we would welcome that. That's actually the real purpose of your work group, and I think you've leaned into that charge. And we also want to really give a deep appreciation for creating the financial model for unifying the two schools. And I know I know I didn't meet with you enough to get a shirt, but I do want to say that I probably spent, and my staff spent, as much or more time meeting with the Fit Tag as any other work group. And I think, Jim Henry's not here, but I would guess he might have a similar sentiment. And so I just want to, appreciate you and look forward to our continuing collaboration. Thank you so much for the hard work and the passion and energy that went into this report. So a couple last things, and I know we're running up on time, but we felt like it was important because your Unification Task Force, again, does work hard, and we have yet to be able to share this with you, and we wanted to be able to share it with you. One of the big questions that kept coming up that we got around feedback was this idea of structure. There wasn't enough structure, or we weren't clear on structure, and we actually took that feedback really seriously and spent a significant amount of time unpacking what we think structure means. And we came up with the following definitions. And so we would invite all of you as work groups, when you use the word structure, to think about these things in some really discrete ways. Right? When we talk about organizational structure, there's two major considerations. There's governance structure, and then there's whether it's a charter or a traditional or a hybrid charter or traditional structure. And those are sort of the three big buckets that are probably available to us in Unification without drilling down into a lot of specifics that we still need to get to. There's personnel structure. Right, there's personnel structure in terms of human resources, in terms of our collective bargaining partners, and I just, from my standout point as a district, I want to really appreciate our collective bargaining partners and what they do for our organization and our schools, and I want to appreciate the Fit Tag pointing out that we could probably afford to continue that structure in a unified space. We could talk about facility structure. Some of that you heard in the survey data, right? In terms of grade level configurations. Is it elementary at one school, middle school at another? We could get a little crazier and talk about, as some of the survey did, what are the grade spans? Is it K6? Is it K4? Is it 7, 8? That's what we mean by grade level configurations under facilities structure. And so we would invite the folks from the facilities group to lean into those kinds of conversations now that you have some survey data to guide you while you await any further guidance from us. Financial structure, right? We talked about supporting Willow Creek through Unification, and there's also obligations that the district has for the Attorney General, and we need to really strongly consider those in terms of structure. And lastly, and I gotta say, I'm really excited that one day, maybe soon, we'll all be super focused, laser focused on the thing that I think is most important to school and teaching and learning, which is curricular structure. Right? Is it dual language? Is it STEAM? Is it project-based learning? It's pre-K. How do we structure the actual teaching and learning that happens at this unified school? And I know our curriculum work group's done a lot of work on that, and our school culture and climate work group has done a lot of work on that. And for those of you still left, I just, again, want to invite us to lean in. It's emotional. Doesn't mean that things never happened. It just means that it doesn't control our lives, and in this case, it doesn't control the lives of our kids moving forward. I still have a lot of hope that we're going to get here sooner rather than later. In the interest of time, I'll let you populate any questions you may have. You can do it digitally. You'll have to actually open a web browser. Sorry, they changed poll everywhere on me, and you can't send text anymore. It's a little annoying. But if you just open your web browser, pollev.com/DrG419, you can post any questions there you still may have after tonight. And for those of you that are left, just want to invite you again, give yourselves a big round of applause for hanging in and all the hard work. And we sincerely appreciate you and thank you. And we will be getting some more communication out around next steps in unification in the not too distant future.